The physical stimulus that activates pain receptors can be mechanical, thermal, or chemical stimuli. For example, the hard pressure from a punch serves as a physical stimulus that would be mechanically activating the pain receptors, whereas heat from a fire would be the physical stimulus that thermally activates pain receptors. So what happens when a pain receptor is activated? Many of the receptors for pain are TRP cation channels. As we said earlier, these channels can be activated by mechanical, thermal, or chemical stimuli. There are many, many different ways these receptors can be activated. However, once a neuron is activated, sodium, a positively charged ion, rushes into the cell. This triggers an action potential that starts a chain of events that allows the signal to reach the brain. In the pathway, the physical stimulus is transduced into an electrochemical signal by the pain receptors themselves. The pain receptors are free nerve endings, and when they are activated by a physical stimulus, they fire an action potential that begins the pathway. For gustation, all foods are made up of different kinds of chemicals that give them their distinctive tastes. In gustation, the physical stimulants are chemicals in the food, also known as tastins. Tastins fall into 5 categories: sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami. Each taste bud on the tongue has 50 to 150 taste receptor cells, and these cells are chemoreceptors that respond to chemical stimuli. The chemicals in food are dissolved by saliva so that they can reach the taste receptors easily. These chemicals bind to specific taste receptor cells, activating a receptor potential. This activation is also known as depolarization, and during this time, sodium and calcium rush into the cell while potassium exits. This triggers the release of neurotransmitters that then bind to the gustatory neuron. The binding of neurotransmitters to the gustatory neuron triggers an action potential. This is how the chemical stimulus from the food is converted into the electrochemical signal of the action potential. For the pain pathway, first, the nociceptor in the skin ascends to the spinal cord via the dorsal root ganglion. Then, a synapse occurs at the spinal cord where decustation, or crossing over, of the signal occurs. From there, the second order neuron ascends to the thalamus via the spinothalamic tract. At the thalamus, a synapse occurs, and the third order neuron now ascends to the primary somatosensory cortex. In the gustatory pathway, the taste receptors on the tongue are activated by a chemical signal, and when activated, these sensory cells synapse with the gustatory neurons, the first order neuron in the pathway. Next, the gustatory neurons ascend to the gustatory nucleus, which is at the level of the medulla. A synapse occurs at the gustatory nucleus, activating the second order neurons. The second order neurons ascend to the thalamus, where the next synapse occurs. Finally, the third order neurons ascend to their destination of the primary gustatory cortex.